Once upon a time, there lived a couple who had been married for over 4 years without a child. Odinaka was a man who desperately wanted to have children. For these 4 years, he had made his wife's life a living hell. His wife Ekene wakes up every morning reminded of her inability to conceive a child. Her husband ridiculed her at every given opportunity, and this began to take a toll on her health. One morning, Odinaka walked in on Ekene, who was busy having breakfast, his heart filled with anger as he watched her eat. Look at how you are devouring the offspring of another. Your mates are having babies, and you are here eating eggs that you cannot even lay, he said to Ekene, who broke down in tears as she pushed her plate aside. She had lost her appetite. Her husband's words cut deep, but this was not the first time that he had spoken cruelly to her. Her mind drifted back to a few weeks ago, to the day they returned from the hospital. She had undergone a series of fertility tests, hoping to find out if IVF was a possible option for her, but the doctors informed her that she had fibroid. Ekene could not believe her ears. She asked to know her fate, and the doctors informed her that she had to first undergo an operation to remove the fibroid. They advised that she had to do this before she even thinks of undergoing an IVF procedure. Ekene was so heartbroken, knowing how unsupportive her husband had been for all these years. "Do you think I am a money-making machine?" he said to Ekene, who pleaded for some money for the fibroid operation. "Your mates are carrying babies in their womb, whilst you are here carrying diseases," he said to Ekene angrily as he walked out on her, stating that she would work for her own money. Ekene stood there frozen, his cruel words echoing in her ears. Her heart ached, but she was not surprised. Odinaka had never shown her any form of kindness in her struggle, and now, when she needed him the most, she was not shocked to see his reaction. Determined not to give up, Ekene wiped her tears and set out to find a way. She took on more menial jobs, working tirelessly from morning till night. She washed clothes, cleaned houses, and even worked as a nanny to a 2-year-old baby whose mother died during childbirth, leaving the baby's father to cater for the baby alone. The baby's father, whose name was Uchenna, was a busy man who had no time to care for his baby himself. He put Ekene in charge of his baby, trusting her to nurture and care for the child as if he were her own. At first, it was difficult for Ekene, holding and feeding another woman's child when she longed to have her own, but over time, the baby's innocent giggles and tiny fingers wrapping around hers softened the pain in her heart. Uchenna noticed how deeply she cared for the child. He often returned home to find Ekene singing softly as she rocked the baby to sleep. "You have the heart of a mother," he told her one evening as he watched her wipe his baby's face with her tender hands. Ekene smiled sadly as she said something that caught her boss's attention. "A mother with no child of her own," she whispered as her boss Uchenna watched her with a look of sympathy. He had seen the pain in her eyes, the quiet suffering she carried every day. "You are a mother, Ekene," he said gently. "A child is not just born from the womb, but from love and care, and I see that in you." His words warmed her heart, but she knew that they wouldn't erase the hurt that she had now endured. That evening, as she walked back home, she felt lighter than she had ever felt in a very long time. For once, she had been appreciated. Someone had finally seen her worth, something her husband Odinaka never did. But the moment she stepped through the door, she knew trouble awaited her. Her husband Odinaka sat in the living room, his face dark with anger. "Where are you coming from?" he asked angrily. "From work," Ekene replied quietly, settling down her bag on the table. Odinaka scoffed and stood up, towering over her. "Work? You mean from your lover's house?" Ekene's brows furrowed in confusion. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb with me, Ekene," he yelled. "I have heard the gossips. You think I don't know? You spend all day in another man's house, taking care of his child, laughing with him, and you expect me to believe that nothing is going on between you?" Ekene's chest tightened. She was too exhausted to argue, but she couldn't let him accuse her of something that she didn't do. Uchenna is my boss. I take care of his baby and that is all. Odinaka laughed bitterly. So now you are defending him? You have the time to care for another man's child, but you cannot give me my own child. Maybe if you spent less time playing mother to another man's son, you would finally be able to have children of your own, he said to Ekene, who stood there broken to hear such words from him. His words felt like a dagger, piercing through her heart. I am doing this for us, Odinaka, she said, her voice trembling. I work hard every day to raise money for my surgery, for the IVF that costs so much money. Shut up, Odinaka said angrily. I am your husband, and I will not have my wife running around another man's house like a shameless woman. You will quit that job immediately, and my decision is final. Ekene stared at him in disbelief. Quit? And do what? Sit here and wait for you to insult me every day like you used to? Odinaka's eyes darkened. If you don't leave that job, then get ready to leave my house. Silence fell between them as Ekene swallowed hard, her mind racing. She had sacrificed so much, endured so much, and yet nothing was ever enough for him. She thought of Uchenna's kind words. She thought of the baby's innocent smile and how much she had fought to survive. However, Ekene struggled with the thought of being homeless. She could not risk Odinaka pushing her out of the house at this time. She thought of what to do and decided to quit her job. It was a hard decision for her, but Ekene believed that she would find a better job. She paid a visit to her boss Uchenna, who pleaded with her to stay. My son is already fond of you, he said to Ekene, whose heart was so heavy. He even went further to propose 100% increase in her salary, which Ekene could not ignore. With the salary increase, Ekene would be able to save up enough money for her surgery in a short time. She could not pass on such an opportunity, although she knew the consequences of accepting it. Ekene requested for some time to think. She arrived home a few minutes later to meet a strange woman who claimed to be pregnant for her husband Odinaka. Her protruding stomach was undeniable. His pregnant mistress sat comfortably on Ekene's couch, rubbing her stomach with satisfaction as she stared at her. Odinaka stood next to her, his arms crossed. This is Amaka, he said coldly, revealing that she was carrying his child. Ekene's breath caught in her throat. The room seemed to spin for a moment. Your child? She whispered, barely able to process what she was hearing. Yes, Odinaka said, his voice laced with arrogance. Since you have failed me as a wife, I found someone else who was willing to give me a child, a complete woman whose womb is not disease-stricken. Ekene's hands trembled. She had endured years of his insults and years of his cruelty, but this was a betrayal that she never saw coming. She turned to Amaka, who was now smiling at her suspiciously, as if she had won some sort of a twisted competition. How long? Ekene asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Amaka chuckled and placed a hand on her belly. 5 months. So, while she was working tirelessly, struggling to raise money for the surgery to give him a child, Odinaka had already moved on. Ekene turned to her husband to see if he felt any atom of regret, but what she saw was pride. So this is why you wanted me to quit my job? She asked bitterly as tears poured down her eyes. In that moment, Ekene knew that she had to secure her job. She called up her boss in front of Odinaka, who fled up in anger to see that she decided to choose her job over him. Odinaka threw her out of his house as his pregnant mistress sat there and watched. Ekene had nowhere else to go. She arrived at her boss's house with her suitcase and explained the entire situation to him, and her boss offered her a room in his house, assuring her that she was safe in his home. For the first time in years, Ekene felt a sense of relief. She had spent so long living in fear and humiliation, bending over backwards to please a man who never valued her. But now, standing in Uchenna's home, she realized that she deserved more. Uchenna could see how broken she was and despite being her boss, he felt her pain. He encouraged her to go ahead with the fibroid surgery, promising to be by her side all through the way. He even offered to lend her the money if she so needed, but Ekene refused. She had worked too hard to let someone else carry her burden. With her increased salary, she knew that she would be able to afford her surgery in a few months. So, she worked diligently, caring for the child who she had grown to love and cherish. One afternoon, as she was preparing lunch in the kitchen, she received the call that her husband Odinaka had gone to her family home to request for the bride price that he had paid to her father. Ekene stood frozen, her hand gripping the phone tightly. She had imagined this moment countless times, the day Odinaka would finally discard her completely, the day he would officially sever the last tie that had bound them. But she never thought it would come this soon or in this manner. Her mother's voice on the other end of the phone was filled with suppressed anger. He came here with that woman Ekene. She spat, that shameless thing, standing by his side with her swollen belly, acting like she's done something great. He tossed your bride price on the table and acted like you were some commodity that he was trying to return. Not anymore. She had already given Odinaka too many of her tears. I understand, Mama, she said, her voice steady. Let him go. Her mother hesitated. Ekene, you have a right to fight this. You are his wife. I was his wife, Mama. She corrected. He made his choice, and I've made mine. After ending the call, Ekene leaned against the counter, exhaling deeply. She was free, truly free. No more insults, no more humiliation, no more living under a roof where she was nothing but a punching bag. Months passed, and the day of the operation finally came. Uchenna accompanied Ekene to the hospital. He held her hand as the doctors wheeled her into surgery. Everything was going smoothly in the theater until the doctors realized that she was 9 months pregnant. The whole place erupted in shock. The doctors exchanged glances, disbelief written all over their faces. The ultrasound scan had shown fibroids, but what they did not realize was that hidden within the growth was a fully developed baby. Ekene, barely conscious, could hear the doctors murmuring, their voices filled with urgency. She's in labor, one of them said shockingly. What? The lead surgeon looked at the screen again. This isn't just fibroid. She's been carrying a child all along. The realization hit Ekene like a wave, but before she could fully process it, a sharp pain shot through her abdomen. Then everywhere went dark. When she woke up a few hours later, the first thing she heard was the soft cries of a baby. She turned her head slightly and saw Uchenna sitting beside her, cradling a tiny baby in his arms. Ekene, he called out to her, revealing that she was now a mother. Tears spilled down her cheeks. A daughter? Her voice cracked. Uchenna nodded, his eyes filled with excitement. Yes, you carried her all this time and didn't even realize it. The fibroids hid your pregnancy. The doctor said it's rare, but it happens. Ekene could not hold back her tears. After years of being called barren, of being insulted, ridiculed, thrown away like she was nothing, she never knew that she had been carrying a child all along, a miracle baby who came to wipe the shame off her face. Uchenna gently placed the baby in her arms, and the moment Ekene looked down at her daughter, everything else faded away. The pain, the suffering, the rejection, all of it. Her baby girl, with tiny fingers curling around hers, was proof that God had never forsaken her. Uchenna reached out and brushed a tear from her cheek. You are stronger than you know, Ekene. You always were, he said to her as she held her baby close. Ekene in that moment realized that she had found something far greater than what she had lost. She had found love, peace, and most importantly herself. As she lay there happy and excited, her husband Odinaka was in another part of the hospital weeping. The weight of the world seemed to crash down on him as he sat in the hospital corridor, his hands trembling as he covered his face. His cries were raw, but no one came to console him. Amaka, the woman he had paraded as a complete woman, had lost their child. The very son he had mocked Ekene for not giving him was gone before he could even take his first breath. The nurses and doctors passed by him without a second glance. No one pitied him, for they had seen how badly he treated his wife Ekene. The same woman he had ridiculed and abandoned was now holding her miracle baby in another part of the hospital. The news spread like wildfire. The same people who had once whispered about Ekene's supposed barrenness now spoke of her miracle baby. Odinaka could hear the whispers. He could not believe that his wife Ekene had given birth to a baby on the same day that he lost his son. He thought back to every insult that he had ever thrown at her. The shame was now his to bear. Summoning the last shred of his pride, Odinaka forced himself to stand. He needed to see his wife. He needed to beg for forgiveness, to plead for a second chance. But when he reached her hospital ward, he stopped on seeing Ekene cradling her baby. Odinaka could see how happy she looked and could not forgive himself for all the pain that he had caused her. He went down on his knees and pleaded for her forgiveness. Ekene, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but please, I was blind. I was a fool. I let my pride and desperation drive me to do unspeakable things. If I could turn back time, I would treat you like the queen that you are. Ekene looked down at Odinaka, a man who had once crushed her spirit, a man who had abandoned her when she needed him the most. You want my forgiveness, Odinaka, she said, her voice steady and powerful. I forgave you the day you threw me out like trash. That day, I decided that you would no longer have control over my happiness. But forgiveness doesn't mean a second chance. Odinaka's eyes widened with pain. You went to my family to request for my bride price. You embarrassed me in front of everyone that I hold dear, she said, her voice shaking in pain. The moment you did that, Odinaka, our marriage ended. Odinaka's shoulders slumped. His face twisted in agony as Ekene's words sank in. He could see clearly that Ekene had moved on. There was nothing more to say, nothing left to fight for. He had destroyed his own home with his bare hands, and now he had to live with the consequences. Slowly, he got on his feet. He cast one last look at the baby as he walked away. Ekene watched as he disappeared down the hospital corridor. His shoulders slumped in defeat, but she felt nothing for him. Not anger, not satisfaction, just peace. She looked up at her boss Uchenna, who smiled gently at her and asked if she was okay. Ekene nodded in agreement, and for the first time in years, she truly meant it. That was how Ekene continued to work for Uchenna, looking after her daughter and his son. As time went on, Uchenna developed feelings for Ekene and bared his mind to her. Ekene too had fallen deeply in love with him and accepted to be with him. For the first time in her life, she was loved the way she had always dreamed of. Uchenna was patient, kind, and gentle with her. He didn't rush her, didn't demand anything from her, and was always there, supporting her, encouraging her, making her feel valued. At first, Ekene hesitated. She had just come out of a painful and toxic marriage. The scars of Odinaka's cruelty were still fresh, but Uchenna was different. He never raised his voice at her, never made her feel less than a woman, never made her question her worth. Over time, she allowed herself to love again. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day, and their children, Chisom and Obina, became inseparable. It was as though fate had written their love story long before they even realized it. That was how Ekene found love again, as she finally got married to Uchenna and lived happily ever after. The lesson to be learned from this story is that life has a way of rewarding us for our actions. We should learn to be kind and patient, for what we give to others will always find its way back to us. Always remember that your worth is not defined by what others think. We are all